the value of their business is at risk. And that's kind of scary to say and even to think about, but if you're not focused or prioritizing your website and making sure your digital presence is effective, there will be a time in the future where you'll just kind of go by the wayside and families won't want to do business with you anymore.
Welcome to FD Talks, the forward-thinking podcast created to help funeral professionals run their business and serve families. Join us as we discover important funeral and death care topics. Gain incredible, dependable, and valuable information to help your business.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of FD Talks. I'm Rob Davidson, and today we're going to continue our conversation of funeral home websites and the benefits they can bring your business and the families that you serve. You'll learn about the importance of prioritizing your website, the positive results that other funeral homes have experienced in doing so, and what the future of websites might look like for the funeral profession, plus much more. Drew Seal, Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Funeral Directors Life, along with Curtis Funk, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Tukios, are back to share their insights on these important topics in part 2 of this 2-part series. Let's talk about some results that you guys have seen with funeral homes that have chosen to make their website a reliable and resourceful place for families.
One of the stats that we've had over the last, let's say, 6 months to a year, we're tracking, how many page views have you had in the last year, and has it increased over the year before or over the last 6 months? Those type of statistics, as well as how many leads are you getting from your website? Because like we've been discussing, both Curtis and I, on the importance of having lead generation on your websites and making your website a lead generator, not a lead killer, if you will, is extremely important. And one of the websites that we've had for about a year, in the first 6 months, we saw a 250% increase in page views over that time frame. And it's really because we started optimizing that website to be ranking higher on Google, getting their reputation on Google to be greater than it was, and thereby having more of that funeral home's website showing up in those Google searches at the top of the list, which thereby gives them more viewers to be going there, because most people are going to look at the top 3 searches, and if you're not in the top 3, you ain't going to get searched on, or you're not going to get clicked on, because that's where everybody is searching first, and that's where they're clicking first. And then with that, because the website was more engaging, it had more valuable content, more clear calls to action to make it more simple for families to navigate the website when they got there. We also saw about 100 leads that came from that particular funeral home's website that year that they didn't have before. So, and this was actually a website that was fairly active on social media, or this funeral home was fairly active on social media. They had a pretty good presence, and their website wasn't terrible by any means. But when we were able to take that on and have Tukios be the website provider on the back end, and us provide more of the content on top of the strong engine that Tukios provides, it allowed for the best of both worlds for that funeral home.
That sounds like a pretty quick return on investment. That's impressive. What are your thoughts, Curtis?
That partnership of having a software company and someone like a company that's focused on marketing really does give you that best of both worlds, like Drew mentioned. There's a lot of us in the software business. We're going to build the right tools and make sure everything's functioning well and performing. Really, the performance is strong, but we're not day to day going into each individual website and providing or producing new content or anything like that. But we do track the performance of the website. It's pretty common for us to see, similar to what Drew said, an improvement in traffic, improvement in search, because the incentives are aligned, right? We benefit from the website performing well, right? It needs to do that because that's just our whole business model, is to make sure people get to the website and engage. But we're also seeing improvements in audience. An audience to us is just anybody that's interacted with the website and giving you a green light to market to them. Improvement in leads, and then the website should be a revenue source for you. And most of us, it's not like anything that anyone's doing novel at this point. All of us, have partnerships with some sort of floral, local florist kind of platform. Several of us have built our own, and in that case, we've also seen that, an improvement there. And and I think, with that, it's like the less like in your face the flower sales are, it's almost like the better engagement you get. Like if you're pasting send flowers buttons in every corner of the website, it kind of is too much and people, I think, reject it. But that's yeah. So we are, for us, it makes sense for all of these areas. They need to outperform where the site was before. And if it does that, then we all win. So.
And so, Drew, how important would you say good support is for website management?
Well, I think it's just as important as some of the other topics we've been talking about, is having the right support team that can talk through the issues with you and they understand those issues too. I mean, if you don't have a support team that understands the funeral profession or doesn't understand how to solve your problems on the website in the right way, especially in the funeral profession, you're going to get frustrated, especially if all you're able to do is maybe email that support group and not be able to actually talk to a live person. And I mean, that's just what we've seen throughout other areas of our business too. It hasn't just been in the website side of things. It's been in any of our other areas that we operate in. Having a live person that understands the funeral profession, that can talk your language, and as far as the funeral language is concerned, not that they're talking a different language in general, but to be able to have that knowledge backing the support team that you have, it just makes for a much quicker process of solving your problems. And if you can do that, then the frustrations of what's going on tend to be a lot less impactful than they would be if it took you a month to get something easily solvable done instead of a day.
So I think in just weighing the costs of like a website in terms of like if you were to look at, we're going to do everything on our own versus partnering with like a provider in the industry, there's a lot of things to think about. Like, of course, there's just the initial like build time, all the work that takes, content creation, like there's just a lot of initial investment, right? And then the time to update as you're going along, like, I think it's, it's important. A lot of funeral directors do go into their website and make minor edits when they want to. But, to Drew's point on like support, it's also nice if they can just pick up the phone, when they're out of the cemetery and say, hey, by the way, can you update this on my website? And someone will just do that for them. That's really nice. But not having to worry about uptime, security updates, backups, hosting. There's a lot of pieces there that you just don't have to think about all the technical things that like, is this website is it gonna like crash, and who can I call if it does? Because that's on you if you're doing it yourself, as well as like just different accessibility laws and things like that. So you're not getting any of those scary letters some people get, or we'll also see, sometimes a scary letter will come every once in a while for like visual content, because maybe a funeral home's like found an image online and put it on their website and they didn't have licensing to do that. Where if you're working with a provider, all that stuff kind of gets, cleared up. But there is like a balance, I think, where there's pieces that the funeral home should hold on to, right? Especially when it comes to just like, if this is like some of your most valuable real estate, you're looking at this as like one of your other locations, then it is important to make sure you have access to the data, right? And so like, we believe in that. So with us, we make it where it's a button. You can download all the data from the website. So you're never worried about who actually owns it. You own it. It's that clear. You just download it. But the other two pieces that are really important are domain names and email, right? Because the domain name management, like we find like most funeral homes feel like that's hard enough. And so to like tack all the other website stuff on top of that makes it obviously so much more challenging. But domain names are actually pretty simple to register and like keep yourself, and then just allow managed access to either your marketing company or your website provider. So you own the real estate, right? Like you own the domain name, and it's very clear because you're paying the bill every year. It's not much, like $15 or whatever, right? But like you're paying it, you've got it in control. Because that's one of the areas where we see like it's a really sticky point, right? If you want to switch a provider, that is at the core. Like if you've got control of the domain, you can make a switch anytime you want to. The other piece though that I think is important for the funeral home, it's like everything else you should outsource to a provider because it's just going to make your life a ton easier. But the two things that I think are important, so domains and email. We do not live in a world today where it makes sense for anyone to be like hosting email for people except for like Google and Microsoft, right? So if you're using Gmail or Outlook, that's the way to do it. We had a question about this morning that I got involved in, where it's like, you know, if funeral home's moving over, will, you know, do we host their email? It's like, well, no, like we don't host email. We'll help you get set up on Gmail or Outlook, because again, that's a long-term solution. They're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on these products, right? No funeral industry provider is doing that with email. So they'll end up using some like, you know, not as good solution versus just using Gmail. That doesn't mean that your email now turns into curtisfunk@gmail.com. It's still like, you know, I'm curtis@tukios.com, but it's a Gmail, like we use Gmail for the client, and it gives me all the bells and whistles that Google has to offer, right? So that's just, I think if you think of that balance of like, how much should you be doing on your own versus how much should you be outsourcing? My recommendation is always email and domains, and make sure you have access to data, and let the supplier, the vendor, marketing company like handle all the rest of the stuff. That is a lot more challenging, and it's just not something you should have to be working with and worrying about every day when you should instead be investing your time with the families.
So Drew, what, in your opinion, what do you think is at risk for a funeral home that decides not to prioritize its website?
Well, we've mentioned it a little bit so far today, but pretty much the value of their business is at risk. I mean, they're being able to be around in the future, I think, and that's kind of scary to say and even to think about, but if you're not focused or prioritizing your website and making sure your digital presence is effective, there will be a time in the future where you'll just kind of go by the wayside and families won't want to do business with you anymore. And I don't know when that time would be. I mean, it could be decades down the road, but investing in your digital presence and your digital reputation is vital to your business surviving for the future.
Yeah, I'll hit on that. I think there's just, we can just use some live examples that we see every year, which are when a new funeral home spins up in like a storefront and they launch a nice website, and all of a sudden they just chipped out 150 calls from that community, right? That's why that matters. Like, because you can be like a brand new business with a brand new website. And if you've done it right, according to Google, you're one of the top results, or you're one of the top funeral homes in the community, right? It's not easy to like dethrone a website that has a lot of domain authority and is like really, managing their SEO well. It's not like you can just spin one up and just take the number one result very quickly. It's not easy. But it's doable, especially if you enter a market where the websites aren't being prioritized and they're not managed properly, and the SEO and all the other marketing pieces aren't in place. Then you can see that happen, and we do see that happen. We see these new. You've seen it. I mean, we've all seen it. I don't think we've all seen how many new businesses can come in and chip out a pretty good chunk of the market share, where all they really have is a great online presence, where their facility a lot of times may not compete with the bigger, nicer places that have been there for a while.
I think it's also important to talk about the family side of this as well, not just the business side for the funeral home, but just like Curtis was talking about, if you had a startup that just happened, but they don't have the right facilities, they don't have the right ability to serve that family well, then that family's going to have a negative taste in their mouth about just the funeral profession as a whole, because you get one chance pretty much to serve a family well in the community, and just that family well. And if you have a bad experience with a funeral home, you're not going to want to go back to that firm the next time you have to deal with death in your family. So what I want to stress to our strong funeral partners out there is, if you can invest in your website, do so for the sake of your families, because that way you can continue to have that market share and then continue to serve those families well, because your facility is there to help them. And I would imagine too that you have a lot of strong funeral home or funeral directors that can serve those families a lot better than maybe a startup could that's just trying to take market share.
So Curtis, what are some tips that you think would be good for funeral homeowners to get started with website success?
Yeah, so I mean, one suggestion I would make, just to make a little plug here, is to check out the FDL and Tukios partnership, because as I mentioned earlier, it is like it's best of both worlds, where you're getting a very innovative and like high performing software product, but you're also getting that high touch white glove approach from FDL, who's doing a lot of that extra heavy lifting, where it is like producing new content all the time, that has a huge impact on your SEO, as well as like writing the content and lead magnets and everything else they're doing to try to drive pre-need leads and at-need leads. So that's I think a tip worth everybody should just take a peek at, and see what the benefit that comes from working with both of these products together.
I think it's important, and we've talked about this a little bit, but I think it's extremely important to focus on both sides of the coin when we talk about your website. So the software side of things, the foundational pieces, the nuts and bolts of your website, they need to be well performing, efficient, being able to stay in compliance, all the things that we've talked about that make a website a great website from the foundation. You've got to look at those things. And like Curtis talked about, Tukios is a great option for you on the software side of things. They have a great performing website, and they're a great partner, and they have great support too. But then at the same time, you don't want to neglect the content side of your site. So you don't want to have the same type of content that your competitor has, but you want to have the appropriate content on your site that's going to educate the families, that's going to make it informative and simple for those families to be able to navigate your website. And a lot of that comes down to the content that you have and the resources that you have available to you to provide to the families on the website. So having a focus on both is going to give you the strongest website and the strongest digital presence that you could possibly have.
I'm going to throw this in there too, because it keeps nagging in the back of my mind, but we've had companies that we've helped. We've had funeral homes that we've helped that have paid $20,000, $30,000 for websites that look pretty but don't work. Right. I mean, I think that's a pretty good example of a lot of what you guys are talking about. It's not just getting the content and the language right, but getting in the right place even.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, and Curtis, I'll let you talk too in just a second, but I think a lot of it is they know that they need a good website. So they spend the money up front to get a good quality website, but then they don't maintain it. They just kind of set it up and then they kind of forget about it and they move on to other things. And it's okay because, I mean, yes, your website is extremely important, but you got to serve families too. And so the funeral homes and the owners and the directors that are there at the funeral home themselves, they're needing to focus on the families themselves and serving those families well, so they kind of forget about some of the things that maybe they need to keep an eye on over time. And that's where having a provider that can have that support and then have that maintenance of the site taken care of for you gives you some peace of mind, knowing that you're going to stay on top of the latest and greatest things that your website can provide.
I think if I was just to like kind of air out what we hear sometimes in the market, where someone's kind of gone that route, they've maybe spent a lot of money, or they've been sold on the idea of spending a lot of money. To Drew's point, you do see that, like a lot of money spent on the front end, and then maintenance or like ongoing like changes get really, really expensive, where all of those pieces could be provided to you at no cost. Now obviously, like where this like turns into the debate is, it's like, okay, well, how do you do it at no cost? Well, you do it by taking a share of the floral sales, right? So we'll get, someone might be in the camp of like, well, we don't like this whole flower partnership idea. And so, so we look at that and it's like, all right, well, the cost, what we've seen with some of these what they're outlaying for monthly fees for a website is a whole lot more than like the small percentage of like floral sales that are shared with the website provider, depending on who the website provider is. Ours are like close to half of what anyone else's is, of like a percentage we take. Is we believe it's like, the audience is the funeral home. Without the funeral home's brand and their partnership and their ability to reach the market, like we wouldn't be able to benefit from that. But it really does kind of align the incentives again on a long-term basis, where your provider wants to make sure your website is performing, because if it doesn't, the provider makes no money. Now, if I'm just charging just a hosting fee, which we do with a handful of customers that requested that. It doesn't matter how the site performs. We get paid regardless, right? And so you're really just not, there's no incentive for the provider now to like try to offer coaching, changes, everything else to make sure the site's performing better. So there's definitely both sides of the debate. And, but we've just found, the model we've got, we did it on purpose for just the reason that it creates a partnership with us in the funeral home. And our mentality of like putting the funeral home first, this is really the best thing for them versus how much you could charge if you're doing custom development, which we do, and custom designs and changes and all that kind of stuff and hosting. And it gets expensive, and it really doesn't need to be.
So Curtis, as we kind of get close to wrapping up here, I'd like to maybe get your thoughts on what do you think is next for the future of funeral home websites?
Yeah. So there's AI. It's the answer to everything right now. Right. And I think there's just a ton to talk about there. Obviously, most every provider's dipped their toes into AI by offering an OBIT writer, which we did as well, and fully integrated it with the software. You see that everywhere. So it's like there's, you can get AI OBIT writers all over the place. We also did the guest book moderator, which I think is nice because that's like not asking anyone to change behavior. It's something that is just a pain in the butt to have to like look at guest book entries all the time and make sure they're good. And AI can do that really well. But there's also like two other thoughts with this. Like one is, like where chatbots go, where, it's like, I think I saw some statistic last week where it was like 65 or 70% of online browsers prefer to communicate with a chatbot versus a person. And so like making sure that there's something there where someone can come hit a chatbot and say, hey, when's the service for this person? And it answers based off of the data in your website. That's like, something we're currently working on is trying to do that. So I think that's something we'll see everyone sort of adopt because they should. There's also like the crazy thought of like, do we then take that sort of chatbot ability and take it to the obituary itself? Because if we had time in this, we could show off some really cool stuff of how you can you could basically keep someone around, right? If you've got some writings, videos, audio, anything of your grandpa, like I've got, I can make him say anything now, right? With AI that exists in his voice. There's, ways to ask questions to people. I mean, there's just really it's like, I don't know if that kind of stuff, it's a little bit crazy. We don't know how that would mess with people's like grief process or whatnot, but really AI is moving really fast. And the other thing that we're trying to keep our eye on and really stay on top of with AI is generative search results. You've probably all seen this too, and maybe realize what it is or not, but you Google something now and your search results show up, but before any search results show up, the AI starts writing an answer. And a lot of times that answer is sufficient for what we need and we don't even go beyond it, right? That's all we look at. And so we're trying to stay on top of that to make sure and obviously the search Google and stuff's got a handful of lawsuits on their desk because of this as well, because if you've published an obituary, you've written the obituary, you own the copyright. They can't just go write it in a generative AI result, right? We got to make sure we're partnering properly with Google and providing the right feedback to Google to say, don't display these inside generative AI, or display this much and give them a suggested action to visit our website to see the obituary or whatever it is. So there's a lot of change going on right now, just exponential change in technology because of AI. And it changes every 3 months. So if you ask that question again in 3 months, it's going to be completely different because everything's moving so quickly. But I think that's the biggest thing is just preparing for, getting familiar with all the tools that are available to AI, and then to slow it down a little bit separately from AI. Online planning and online shopping is needs to be the norm. And so, if you haven't got anything connected to your website right now for planning online, shopping online, pricing, and transacting even, you should look at the options that are available.
Well, Drew and Curtis certainly gave us a lot of things to think about when it comes to funeral home websites. We hope that their suggestions and tips have been helpful for you and your funeral home business. Because no matter what size, location, budget, or call volume you have, having a customized and powerful website has proven to increase funeral homes' market share and their ability to help families. The question is, what is your website currently doing to help you grow your business? So thanks again, Drew and Curtis, for all your thoughts and for helping us think more about this topic. We'll cover a lot more great topics on this podcast moving forward, so be sure to check back with us regularly for new episodes. And from all of us here at FD Talks, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
If you would like more information about today's topic or previous discussions, please visit us online at funeraldirectorslife.com/FD Talks. There you can find information about this podcast and submit any comments, suggestions, or feedback about our series. We also welcome your ideas for future episodes. Listen to FD Talks wherever you get your podcasts.